Okay, so this is my backside trailing edge piece that I just put on. I've got it aligned at the end here, even with the other piece and even with the rib. And then I've got the bottom edges here even all the way across. And I've just got it clamped along the way to hold everything intact. And I've got it clamped up on top as well at each rib at these locations here along the way. I'm going to try to show, if I can, what the epoxy looks like after I got the thick bead put in. Try to do this with a flashlight. Let's see. I don't know if it will focus, but you can kind of maybe sort of see the epoxy bead as the gravity pulls it down into that seam, and it forms almost like a wedge shape, the epoxy itself. And it does that down the whole length of the trailing edge. I'll include a picture or two of this too, which will hopefully come out better because this is hard to see. But anyway, that's the idea. You just put in a thick bead of epoxy and let gravity do its thing. Let's see if I can get a little bit of video from up on top here. Let's see. Not really. You can't really tell that there's a bead of epoxy in there, but there is, and it does very, very well. I'll see if I can get a picture of this too, but very hard to tell here, and I apologize for that, but trust me, it's in there. The whole length of the trailing edge. And that's that. You just continue to do your other pieces the same way. I've got one more piece to do here, from here over. And that will be it for the wing. And then of course I got to put the mating two pieces on the aileron, which I had just cut off. And that's pretty much it. You just follow the same procedure for the other couple of pieces and you're done. And then after everything's dry and you get your clamps off and you get your wing back up on your jig or your bench, whatever it is, you come back and sand this edge with some sandpaper just to make sure that this piece, the edge of this piece and the edge of this back piece, that they're even, that you just want to sand them kind of square. When you go to wrap your fabric around here, you'll have like an eighth of an inch flat, if you will, along this entire edge. I think that will look very, very, very nice. So that's how I did it. This may in fact be the last video for this DVD. I'll throw in some pictures and some ending comments and hits as needed, but that's pretty much it. Alright, let me see what else I can come up with, any little hints, pictures, tips, etc., and see if I can incorporate those as well.
Here is the trailing edge on the top of the wing, but in this picture the wing is upside down, so it looks like it's on the bottom, but this is the top trailing edge. And at the top of the picture, if you count back, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 ribs, you can kind of see a gap there. That's where the aileron starts. So the aileron in this picture is in the foreground. But once you get the top and the bottom pieces in place, this is kind of what you're looking at having. Now this is just a mock-up. I was just testing to make sure that the top and bottom pieces do match each other and that they fit on the wing itself correctly. But ultimately this is what the trailing edge will look like when it's in place, top and bottom, and epoxied. The couple of things that you want to remember to do when you get your pieces together, you want them have the ends of the pieces meet at the bottom, where on the right of this picture you can see, if you look at the tip of the trailing edge where the top and the bottom pieces meet, that is pretty much they're pretty much even. You don't have one overhanging the other. and then the ends themselves, the actual ends of the pieces, you want them to be flush with one another. Again, side to side, you don't want one overhanging the other. So then this is just another picture of the wing in place, ready for gravity to do its thing and to help me with the epoxy. I just mounted it vertical, making use of my bench and a couple of other supports to hold it in place. And then here is another close-up shot of how I have it attached to my workbench, making use of the oak planks C-clamped to the bench, and then the wing itself is C-clamped to those overhangs, and then it's supported on the far end with a support. You can see also in this picture the aileron has already been removed, and that has been moved to the bench to be worked on separately. Here is yet another exciting photograph of the topside trailing edge in place and the support to hold the wing, and of course it is C-clamped to the bench top. This is ready to roll. One thing that you may have noticed in the video is that I had laid down a drop cloth underneath the trailing edge. I highly recommend that because sometimes the epoxy will ooze and you'll get drips on your floor, which I'm sure you don't want. So make sure you lay down something to protect the floor. Alright, this picture here is the epoxy, the heavy bead of epoxy along the entire length of the trailing edge and this is what will, when you mount it vertically to the wing, this is what will ooze down into the gap and seal the trailing edge and its entire length. This is nothing more than another picture, the same thing. And then once you get this epoxy in place and you get the epoxy on each individual rib, then obviously you go ahead and you fit the piece to the wing and start clamping it. Now, I'm not a big fan of clamping, as you know. I don't like to squeeze out the epoxy if I can help it, but I can't think of any other way to get the trailing edge pieces to meet. So as you see here, I just lined that back edge with clamps to hold it in place and to make sure that that entire edge is sealed and that the top trailing edge and the bottom trailing edge meet each other that entire length. And then if all goes well, this is what you should end up with. You should have an epoxy bead that seals and holds the entire length of the trailing edge together. And then I have another picture here from the top trying to look down into the trailing edge just to show that the epoxy will seal that entire length. If you can get that wing up vertically and let gravity pull it down, it should seal that gap completely. So I think that will do it for the wings. I am going to cover just briefly the tail section trailing edge pieces, and I'll see what I can do with that. But it's that well, let me see what I can come up with. Hold on. As some of you may be aware that have looked at hint video number 3, I also included the scallop trailing edges on my tail surfaces. This piece here is the beginning of the rudder trailing edge, and you can see the lines, the vertical lines represent the location of the rudder stringers, and then the solid horizontal line you can ignore for now. That line is just a reference line for a cut that needed to be made on the ends of the board to mate them with the tapered pieces of the rudder. So for now you can ignore that solid horizontal line. Here you can see the end of the trailing edge where I had cut it to mate with the tapered pieces of the top and bottom rudder. Again, that's covered in hint video number 3. You can ignore that for now. That's what the solid line was for, so just ignore that. But the smaller horizontal dashes, those represent the setback for the curve. Those lines represent the highest point of the curve between the stringer locations, just like we had done on the wing. Here is another picture of oh man, I can't think straight today. The rudder trailing edge already marked and ready for cut. Again, you can see the stringer locations, the setback marks, and then the curves drawn just like we did with the wing with the pencil and string. And then here is a picture of it in place. You can see it's been cut, obviously, and in the foreground where the clamp is, you can make out the tapered piece of the rudder. What you may want to note here are the stringers and how I tapered the ends of the stringers so that I didn't want them to come across at their full width and then just dead end, because I thought that would look kind of nasty underneath the fabric. So I decided to go ahead and taper them off so that you'd have a cleaner transition with the fabric. The idea is coming from the scallops, with the fabric you come back toward the stringers, and with the stringers tapered, hopefully the fabric will just kind of flow and lay up on top of them without any real noticeable hard line underneath. That's why I tapered the stringers, and I also set them back a ways from the scallops. You can see here that they're back a decent amount. It was just kind of a made-up figure. I actually used that solid line. The line was a reference line to cut the ends of the board, and I just went ahead and used that same line as a reference to end the stringers. But with them set back a ways from the trailing edge and with them tapered like that, hopefully when I get the fabric on, you won't be able to really tell that they're even there. So here's another picture of the rudder in work. I don't know how useful this picture is, but you can see the trailing edge in place, and you can see vaguely how I notched it to fit in with the tapered top and bottom pieces. Again, that's covered more in hint video 3. And then this picture here, I believe this is the last picture. This one is the finished rudder, complete with stringers. The stringers, I believe, are in the stock location as per the plan. I may have moved them a little bit to fit my hinges in place, but the rudder is pretty much made to plan, as were the elevators, which are almost identical. Well, the building procedure is exactly the same as the rudder, so I'm not going to go into building the trailing edges for the elevators, but here the finished rudder, stringers, scallop trailing edge in place, pretty much ready to go. So hopefully you're still awake, and these last few still pictures and my lousy narration have been somewhat helpful. But it's very simple to incorporate the scallops on your tail section. It just takes some thought to lay everything out properly, but the install really isn't any different than the trailing edge that's shown on the plans.
Hey everybody, just wanted to say real quick again, thanks for checking out my YouTube videos, and just a couple of real quick tidbits before you leave. If you'd be so kind as to check out my GoFundMe page, the link is down in the description of these videos. For those of you who find it in your heart to donate for this new cause of mine, I've got another project going on, and there's some really cool things I'd like to do with this aircraft, and again, that's all explained in my GoFundMe. But if you find moved enough to go do that and donate, I've got this horizontal stabilizer skin, and donors will get their name put on this skin, and ultimately when this gets filled and the aircraft gets finished, this is going to be hung up on the wall of honor in my hangar, just a little bit of recognition for those donors who helped make the project a reality. Another thing too is, I'm sure you've noticed that even this video that I'm making right now is of the same or worse quality than the video that you just watched, and that's because, believe it or not, this camera is the exact same camera that I filmed the original hint videos with. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm not really sure why, but I know the video quality lacks, but hopefully the information within is worth something. And the other thing that I wanted to mention real quick is, again, these are little snippets from my hint video DVDs, so a lot of these individual clips just kind of come to an abrupt end. That's just the way it is when I'm trying to rip these DVDs apart and re-edit them into small little segments, and they just kind of end weird at times. But that's it. That's all I wanted to say. And again, thanks, and I hope you'll come back, check out my channel, and see if there are any new videos and updates. All right, I'll talk to you then. See you.